Slurped it up. Apple juice in the house. How's it going, my G's? Just wanted to read quickly through a couple of comments from yesterday's video on the demon bass. Cami, if you're ever on the lookout for natural sounds, check out Capercalis. Sorry, I can't speak today. The birds with wicked neurosound on their own. Gute Besserung. Thank you. I think, is that the bird that imitates like loads of different sounds at once, which is crazy, because I actually did make some sounds using that before on like a video I did a year or two ago. Count House, thank you, mate. Get well, back on the beats, will do. Big G, you're the best. Hope you feel well. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for your support. I'm feeling a lot better today. Almost confident enough to jump back on in front of the camera, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, I've made a quite cool riser today, and there's a couple of things that I did in Vital in the Matrix section which are pretty interesting, so I think you're going to want to check this out. That's why I've called it the Matrix riser. Also, it sounds a little bit sci-fi, a little bit like the Matrix, and there's a couple of macros on here as well, which are pretty cool. But I'm not going to drop this one for free because I'm building a sample pack at the moment, so it'll probably be on that one. Anyway, let's take a little listen to the riser on its own, and then I'll play it through again with the macros. So now I'll add in my pitch riser and also a bit of extra speed boost here. Let's go a bit slower on this one, actually. Now let's add in the stutter mode as well. So as you can hear, we've got some pretty nice textures out of this, and there's two cool things about this patch. One is these kind of movements that I've got with the matrix section and the macros working together, and also just the texture and the sort of timbre of the sound, which was quite it's quite an interesting way how I got to that from what is a very, very simple and basic voicing section. I've got a triangle here, and everything is being tracked to this LFO 1, and when I say everything, I mean the level. And you can turn up the grid here to 32, and then you can choose this brush, and I've chosen a triangle, and I've drawn in a bunch of triangles that kind of go up in a sort of exponential pattern, and this is all tracked to the level. And you can see there's sort of two little mice running across, following each other. And that's because the stereo knob is turned up here. So we actually have two. And I've done about 0.55 or so. That's close enough. So we've got the left and right going independently. So that's already going to create quite a nice stereo interest to the sound. So that's the basic movement. And we're going to add in some other sounds to follow this movement. So the sine wave, an octave lower. You can hear getting some nice bass into the sound, and then a little bit of texture in the high end. I've got the brown noise also coming in on the level, and we're going to also take out some low end on this, so it's just the high end of the brown noise. It's very quiet in the mix for now, because as I go on to the effects now, we're really gonna hear it be exaggerated a lot more. So the first thing was to add a reverb and start to blend everything together almost as one. So I've got the mix up really, really high. I've got a 60% size. Don't tell her I said that. Anyway, that's really nice because it's making it a little bit more in the background, which is where a riser should be anyway, you know, so there's no problem in reverbing the hell out of it. Yeah, now this gets really interesting, because when you compress it now, you can already hear we've got like a lot of that noise coming out. So I'm going to turn that back down to 0. Because you could sort of barely hear the noise before, but now with the compressor, you can really, really hear it. And what I've done is I've left the attack up at 50 and turned the release down to 0. But what this has done is, I imagine that it's kind of like just really brought everything up in its own particular way. But as we've sort of reverbed it all before, and like kind of blended everything in a little bit with a 50% reverb, now we've got this whole new kind of version of the sound, which, you know, has that sort of natural sense of depth to it already, but we sort of brought it a bit more in the foreground again, because it's become a lot louder, you know, but it's still got that sort of complexity in its depth is still in there. So you can start to hear, like, you know, you hear the sine wave working in there, you hear the saw wave, you hear the noise, and you hear them all kind of blending in with each other, and it just creates more of a soundscape in this way. Like, sounds quite nice and full. And there's not too much else. That was the main trick there, really, was reverbing it a lot and then compressing it to bring out that texture. And then like I've just done a tiny bit of a drive on the distortion and a tiny bit of a boost on a treble and a EQ. That's exciting, isn't it? I don't think that's anything else after that. Yeah, so that's the main sort of tone of the sound done. But now we get into the advanced parts in the matrix. And what I've decided to play with here, this is really interesting for sound design as well. We can go a bit crazier here as well, is I've started to play with this. I think, what do they name it here? Is it the start slider, or does it have a name? Is it the... because I've tracked it, LFO1 phase is the phase, isn't it? The LFO1 phase, that's it. Yes. So I've tracked the LFO2 to the LFO1 phase, and the LFO2, we've got a really slow ramping up, it's like a saw up, and it's got a very, very small amount of modulation on, which is consequently being tracked to this macro here. So you can see the LFO phase is on 0, and I've the LFO2 amount, how much we're modulating the phase, is on 0, but when you turn up the macro, I don't know if you can see it there, but it's going to start to yeah, if you look here on the modulation 4 amount, you know, it's inactive at the beginning, but when the macro's turned up, it's basically going to start activating that modulation so that the slider is going to move up along at the same time. So you can see how quickly the slider is moving up, or how slowly the slider is moving up, you know, but determined by where I place the speed knob exactly here. So it's almost, you know, while the sound is moving up as you would expect it to normally, we're also then at the same time moving the starting position. So it's sort of effectively, yeah, it's chaos basically, but it's going to make it even faster. And what happens though, we can really start to get some crazy sounds out of this. So if I go back to the saw up here, if I make it even faster, and let's go for a saw down. Let's go even faster here. You know, that's just to demonstrate the chaotic sound design experiments that you could do by playing with the phase as there is already a pattern drawn and then modulating the phase of the actual pattern. So that's very exciting, isn't it, my G's? Because you could this way, through the kind of crazy changes in the timing, you can generate some new sort of unheard sounds and harmonics, which are really cool. And imagine if you could sort of modulate that to come down. So why don't I do that quickly as well on the LFO here? Let's just for a laugh, let's just do that on a saw down, and then we'll just make that nice and slow here. I think I'm going to have to do it the other way, like this. There we are. So that is becoming, you know, even more complex than I actually initially started with. If I revert back to my original patch though, so just with this like normal speed mode turned up, so it's a little bit faster than usual. I can just introduce a little stutter, and this basically just speeds up the actual LFO2 pattern down here. I know this is all getting a bit sort of convoluted and a bit, yeah, lots of LFOs on top of LFOs. But if you just play around with it yourself, you know, maybe you won't have the best understanding of what's actually going on. But through some crazy routing like this, you can actually get some new and unheard sounds that could be very, very, very unique. And then I've got a little riser here, and this is quite a simple modulation. Simply on the advanced tab, on the transpose mode, just pitched it up sort of around 3 semitones, and placed this on a on an LFO. So it's just, if I turn this up, it's going to activate the riser. So how we've done that is just, again, in the matrix section, you know, we've put on our macro to modulate the setting to come on, essentially. So you can, I like it when the riser is not so extreme, like 12 semitones up, you know, even 3 semitones up over a long period of time. You can feel that rising tension without it sounding cheesy. So that's why I like to do my risers sort of maybe at 3 semitones at a time. So let's try one last thing before I go. Let's do a little bit of another sort of experiment with this LFO2 here. So if I sort of reactivate this, and let's do it again on like a sort. Let's turn up the frequency. By playing with both the stereo knobs on the main LFO and the secondary LFO as well, we can start to sort of spread out this chaos, you know, in the stereo field, where we want those kind of little details to be heard. So yeah, that's quite exciting, and I'm definitely going to probably tomorrow morning do another video on something perhaps where we could make a more of a practical and easier, let's say a simple like neurofunk like wub or stab or something, but using this technique where we sort of stack LFOs on top of LFOs and modulate the phase position to generate some otherworldly harmonics, but try and sort of control it and do it, get it to fit just with like a one-shot stab, but having this sort of detailed control within that short space of time to really control like the tone and texture of it. So I know this is maybe going over a lot of people's heads. It's certainly going over my head, but this just having experimented with this today has given me has reassured me that I still have more to figure out with Vital, and I think there's still some wicked sort of sounds you can unlock, even with literally such simple oscillators, just by rerouting things in a more interesting way. I might save this one. Actually, it's pretty crazy. Let's call this Aladdin's Nightmare. Don't ask me how I come up with my preset names, because my brain is just like, I don't know what goes on in there sometimes, but yeah, here we go. Anyway, stay tuned. I'll be dropping a preset pack, another fresh one. I've got some really cool ones in there. It still needs a while still. I think I'm only about halfway through, so maybe in about 3 or 4 weeks time. Anyway, thanks a lot guys for watching. Thanks for all your support. I'll hopefully be back with a face to show you in the next day or two, and don't do anything I wouldn't.